Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to our CMO panel event today. My name is Alex Poulos. I'm from Macudu, and I'm dialing in from Marin County, just north of San Francisco. It's a wonderful day here. I'm very excited to welcome four amazing, truly amazing marketing and revenue leaders today and into what we hope to be a very open and interactive conversation with all of us here. Today, we'll talk about the CMO role and how the CMO role is evolving in the midst of a lot of change. Change in terms of the perception of the role itself, change in terms of the charter or the expectations of the marketing organization as a whole, change in terms of new go-to-market motions, new technologies, new and more data, new data stacks. There's a lot of change. All I promise is that we'll try to keep it real and tangible and learn from each other's experience. And to that extent, we'll do our best to share learnings and stay away from acronyms and buzzwords. I challenge the panel to not use the word ABM throughout the session. Let's see if we can do that. So let's get started. Maybe with a few housekeeping items. There are two tabs that you can use, a chat and a questions tab. Feel free to leverage the chat tab let's start by saying hello and introducing yourselves. Who you are, who you work for, what's your role, where you're dialing from. And please use the chat throughout the session. It's rarely the topics that we discuss have a black or white answer. It'll be great to get more points of views, more experiences, more sharings. We also have a questions tab. Please feel free. We are planning to have some time at the end for questions, so feel free to use this tab to ask your questions. Clarification: all attendees are muted except for the panelists. So we have the privilege of the background noise with our kids coming back from school, the dog barking, construction next door. Please bear with us if that happens. And last but not least, the number one question in online events: will this session be recorded? Yes. Will be shared with attendees? Yes, right, promptly after the event. So that's in terms of logistics. Let's jump in and get started. I'm truly honored to be sharing the stage here with Raj, Sarah, Kevin, and Sheridan. There's a ton of experience in this panel, and we learn from each other. So I would like everyone to introduce yourselves, share a little bit how you got to where you are today, just very briefly, and just to get us into the conversation, share one way that your role as a CMO, or the CMO role in general, has changed in the last 12 months. Let's start from left to right here. Sarah, you can go first.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Strope, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at TaxJar. TaxJar is a sales tax compliance platform, and we were acquired by Stripe in June of 2021. And I got to TaxJar via 3 startups. So I am a 3 times marketing and customer success leader at startups, and also spent 5 years as an executive at IBM, working on IBM Watson and IBM Cloud. And I think one of the things that's changed the most really in the past 12 to 24 months in my role as a chief marketing officer is owning a number for the full customer lifecycle. And that means owning a number for expansion revenue, not just for new customer acquisition.
That's amazing. I love that proximity to revenue. Raj, you're next.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm excited to be part of this esteemed panel. My name is Raj Sakar. I joined 1Password as a CMO 9 months back. Before that, I was an external advisor to 1Password. If you look at my career, I predominantly worked in PLG products for like Google Hangouts, Google Apps, Trello, Bitbucket, Confluence, HipChat, and now 1Password. I call myself a student of PLG. My passion primarily is how do you marry PLG kind of motion with top-down motion, which is like how do we take PLG products upmarket. I live in the Bay Area with my wife, and I will be moving to New York City in a month. So I'm excited to, move to the Big Apple. I've been in California for almost 22 years, so I'm gonna miss the wineries and obviously Silicon Valley as well.
That is certainly a big change,
Yeah.
personally and professionally, right? Sheridan.
Hello, everybody. Sheridan Ganger here. I'm the head of revenue marketing at honeycomb.io. Honeycomb is a modern observability platform that enables engineers to fully understand how their code is performing in production. I've been with the organization for almost exactly 1 year. I think I'm celebrating my 1 year on the 22nd coming up. And prior to joining Honeycomb, I've held revenue marketing leadership roles for the past 9 years, with a heavy flavor around demand generation, operations, and sales development, which we will be getting into in more detail on this panel. And I actually started my career in sales as a BDR in 2007 at Salesforce. So that's where I developed my love for B2B SaaS technology, and it's sort of set the foundation for where I'm at today. I think that the biggest thing that has changed for marketing leaders in the last 12 months is the need to be able to move a metric in a very short amount of time. And what that means for us is that as marketers, we can measure so many things across so many different parts of the funnel. So it's about getting very clear about the metrics that matter most to the business and how you can take that data to move that metric.
Certainly, that's great. Metrics that matter. I think we'll get to that more further down the conversation. So thank you for the intro. Kevin, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, I'm Kevin Tate. I run the marketing and sales teams at Clearbit. Clearbit provides data and an activation platform that companies use to improve the precision and efficacy of their go-to-market. A lot of times we're working with companies that have a PLG motion, or the other word we can't say, motion. And so we get to work with a lot of different CMOs around those things. And I'd say a shift that we've seen a lot, not just for ourselves, but for our customers over the last 12 months, has been the continuing proliferation of customer touch points and channels. There's so many apps and opportunities to engage with a customer on the website and off the website and through existing and new distribution channels. It's changing the game.
Kevin, thank you. Do you also see data, like a proliferation of data coming from all those customer touch points, data that probably we should do something with?
Data from and data to, right? All those are opportunities to make smarter those customer touch points, so they're more relevant and they're more efficient, and then learn as much as you can about that interaction. So yeah, lots of data.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Super happy to have you all here. Let's start. I think, Raj, you talked about PLG and you brought PLG into the conversation. As CMOs, we've made our career primarily trying to partner with, successfully or unsuccessfully, with a chief sales officer or sales leadership. I think when I look back at my career, that's the most I've spent my time, at least in the C-suite. But now things may be different with PLG. Is the chief product officer the CMO's best friend? Sarah, I think you came up with that. So why don't you share your thoughts here? What happens with PLG companies?
You're asking me or Sarah, Alex?
Let's start with Sarah, because Sarah came up with that particular line, and then Raj, we'd love to hear your opinion as well.
Well, I do think it's goodbye to the old sales marketing friction and hello to the chief product officer as our new frenemy. And I say that because it's really a question of who owns the customer and the customer experience, especially in a PLG model. As marketers, we're responsible for acquiring customers into the PLG model and doing that through means of education and nurturing and helping them use the product to the fullest. But there winds up being this transition line at some point once you've gotten the user into the trial or even started in the beginning. And that's where the chief product officer, there has to be some kind of handoff with the product team, or where there has to be a really tight alignment of this is how we're going to measure milestones of product usage together. This is how we're going to do in-app education. This is how we're going to marry together email and in-app nurture points. And so I think it's really a point where now you have to figure out how to own it together. What are those handoffs, and how do you make sure that even every little bit of language that you use throughout the product experience matches the brand experience as well?
Sarah, do you feel there's a different skill set, or you mentioned language, a different language that CMOs need to be comfortable with to be able to interface with the product team versus the sales team?
I think you have to find a commonality in what you're optimizing for. So making sure that you are speaking the same language in terms of education, in terms of getting to those product milestones, and knowing that just capturing, for marketers, knowing capturing the customer isn't enough. It's getting them to usage and then even getting into product delight. So then we get to that point of expansion as well.
Great point. Raj, I think all the companies you mentioned that you went through, they have something in common, and I think it's PLG. Even before it was called PLG, maybe. Yes. And obviously, like 1Password, you're running at scale the PLG motion very, very successfully. From your perspective, how is the CMO's role different in a PLG company? What are some different responsibilities, metrics? How are you approaching that?
I think Sarah actually answered the question perfectly. If you think about a top-down motion, or even if you go back like 10 years, it's all about the customer journey, right? The way the customer will come to know about the product by seeing an ad, and then they will come to the website, they'll click on a contact us form, and then marketing basically hands over to sales, and sales basically goes and tries to sell the product. You sign like a 12 or a 24-month contract, and then most of the time you forget about the customer, right? With the PLG motion, that customer journey has completely transformed, because if you look at the customer journey end to end, I think all three functions, product, marketing, and sales, owns a portion of the journey, right? Like Sarah mentioned, like the first portion of the journey is primarily owned by marketing, where a customer sees an ad, comes to the website, clicks on the sign up button, and signs up for the product, right? And then the product team takes over, because the customer goes through the sign up flow and then gets activated inside the product. And then if you think it's a viable motion for sales, not every single customer gets touched by sales. Then sales goes and basically tries to upsell and cross-sell in products or features, and then retains the customer in the long run. Now that customer contract, what 10, 15 years used to be a 12-month contract, now it's like a monthly contract. So you have to constantly keep the customers happy. So the role of the CMO, like in a top-down motion, and even if you go 10 years back, the CMO and CSO was the CRO were very close to each other. Now the CMOs are much closer to the CPO as well, to Sarah's point. And I know many of you have probably heard about this concept of growth teams in PLG companies, and that growth teams, when you try to build out growth teams, you basically have some portion of the growth team in marketing organization, some portion in the product organization. So CPO has, like CMO, need to work really well together in PLG companies. Also, I would touch on one trend you'll see in the market right now. You'll see a lot of CMOs with product marketing background. The reason is because as a CMO, you need to understand the product side of the business as well.
Raj, when you talk about, I think this is amazing insights. Thanks for sharing. When you talk about growth teams, you mentioned, okay, there's a part of a growth team as part of the marketing organization, part of the growth team as part of the product organization. Is that the best structure in your opinion, or should growth be on one side, the other side, or independent, right? Because I'm seeing companies where growth reports to the CEO nowadays.
Yeah, so this is an age-old debate, actually, where it should live. Should it live in the product organization? Should it live in the marketing organization? Or should it be a separate organization? Kind of depends on the product a little bit. You'll see in some organizations, it's usually part of the product organization. Like Facebook, for example, the growth team was part of the product organization. Whereas in Atlassian, for example, a huge portion of the growth team was part of the marketing organization because marketing owned the funnel until the point when a user or a customer get dropped into the product.
Got it.
In 1Password, this is the cool thing about working for an early stage company. We are trying to figure it out where it should live. And one of the models we have right now, since a portion of the funnel is marketing, a portion of the funnel lives in the product org, there will be a growth counterpart in both product and marketing, and they need to work really well together.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, we have a similar model at TaxJar as well. Yeah.
So
and I think it really helps
team
organize around the data, Alex. You know, it helps you understand those different handoff points in the funnel and organize around the data so that you're looking at total lifetime value of the customer. You're looking at those product usage milestones together, and you're looking at, you know, your trial users or your, you know, existing customers in terms of cohort analysis as well.
Yeah. And I would add to that if CMOs were not thinking about the full customer life cycle, I think PLG is forcing us now to think that there's a lot more after the initial acquisition, right? So it's not like throw it to sales, as Raj says, right, or to customer success. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about marketing operations. How important is marketing operations in the modern marketing organization, and an organization that, as we mentioned, there are a lot of touch points, there's a lot of data coming in from and to. Sheridan, what is your thought around marketing operations and the importance in the CMO's world today?
That's a great question, and I may shake it up a little bit by saying the most important operational piece in a modern marketing organization is a revenue ops org, and less so a marketing ops org. And let me flesh this out just a little bit for some context, because as marketers now, we're revenue leaders. We're not just about delivering leads anymore. We're about full funnel delivery, right? All the way into revenue, and to Sarah's point, up and, you know, through retention. And so when we look at the types of support that we need to be able to serve on those metrics, right? You need a team that can understand not only the systems like, you know, HubSpot or a Marketo that's going to serve sort of the marketing needs, but you need to understand the systems, the integrations, the processes that are going to improve productivity workflows for not only your marketing team, but for your sales reps, right? The folks that are closing on those deals. And so when I'm looking at my org and I'm thinking about where do we start in terms of operations, it's always revenue ops, right? That becomes our foundation to be able to serve our customer, which is sales. I'd be curious to hear some of the other thoughts from the panelists.
Yeah, Sheridan, that's refreshing. I love that conversation between ops, sales ops, rev ops, biz ops. Kevin, I'll turn to you because at Clearbit, you're serving a lot of those customers. You're talking to marketing ops or rev ops or biz ops customers and users.
Yeah, a lot of ops, and we have a lot of ops internally. It's interesting. So when I think about, and we've been talking a lot about what's in marketing ops, what's in revenue ops, and then is there not to add another ops, but is there a data ops function that ultimately acts as kind of a service group to the others? For us, the marketing ops piece ends up being really specific to the instrumentation of the lead gen and funnel piece, right? So attribution and spend, and we find you need some pretty specific systems and instrumentation to be able to do the optimization you want, and be able to form a hypothesis and try things and see what happened, which of course leads to, if you're not careful, marketing ops looking at some fancy report they made in Mode, and then sales ops or rev ops is looking at something in Salesforce and going, they don't match, right? So I think we've avoided that pretty well, in part because we have a pretty robust data ops function that lives inside of marketing. So if you were to look at our version of the warehouse and the single view of the customer, and then things that we're able to look at across the revenue chain, we actually have a small group that does that from within marketing for the other groups across RevOps. does that belong in RevOps longer term? Maybe. But it's interesting because I think that sort of centralized view of the customer and the insight that comes out of it has to have a center of gravity somewhere. And being a MarTech solution provider for us, it's marketing.
Got it.
One thing I'll add to that is when you think about sort of marketing and sales, those are two wildly high demand orgs, right? And so I look at RevOps as somewhat of like the mediator between those two organizations that can truly identify like where are the gaps, right, across the whole funnel, and then be able to prioritize against filling those gaps based on, again, the goals of the business. And so, I said revenue ops, but there is a home for marketing ops there. But to Kevin's point, it's more about sort of that center of gravity within the go-to-market organization.
Got it. Very, very powerful. What is one change that you've recently made as CMOs based on data, right? Purely based on data, something non-trivial. Sarah, I will start with you because you used another great line last week with me. You're like, I think the MQL is dead. That's what data shows. Is that true? Is the MQL dead?
Ooh, I think it'll be hotly debated, but I think when you're looking at, a PLG model, when you're trying to get people to, points of action and usage, this idea of, did they meet some basic criteria, and is it ready for sales to follow up? Probably won't work for all business models. So I think, some organizations are looking at more of a, product qualified lead. Have they hit those milestones? What actions have they taken? And when we think about even looking from that lens about changes you can make, we hold at TaxJar a monthly voice of the customer call with kind of cross-functional stakeholders from product, sales, marketing, customer support. And in doing that, we learned that our support team was getting an influx in tickets around reporting feature. And hearing what was happening and how customers were interpreting it, we actually said, we can solve that on the marketing side. We can just add an email into the product onboarding nurture stream that addresses how to use this report and what it does do and what it doesn't do. Yeah. We added that report in. We added that email about reporting in. We actually moved it up in the email marketing stream for the onboarding, and we reduced support tickets by 30%. So you would only understand that if you were looking at the data, you were looking at the product milestones together, and you understood what kind of product qualified lead was. And then we also knew that if people looked at that part of our dashboard, they were 3 times more likely to convert to a customer.
It's a direct line to revenue as well. So that's
exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. Sheridan, let me ask you. I mean, we share some experience or some past at Chardio, like working with data-driven organizations, and obviously you use data, interpret data day in, day out. What is the decision you've made based on data recently?
Great question, and very timely. So as part of my role, right, is about user acquisition. And so I oversee all of our digital efforts, including paid social. And so as we were examining our paid social campaigns and the effectiveness of those campaigns, we noticed that we were driving a ton of impressions and ton of views to our landing pages. Right? But that form, people were bouncing. Our conversion rates to submission to an MQL, right, were basically 0. And so this told me, right, the content is interesting. People want to understand sort of what value we are trying to bring to them via this ad, but they don't want to fill out a form, right? And that aligns with our ideal customer profile at honeycomb.io, market to developers, right? And so what I want to do is get people educated, let them read, let them engage. And so sort of the answer is twofold here. I remove the forms. So we are now looking at, clicks, and we're looking at bounce rates and time on page, right? And then we're also looking at more sort of through point conversion rates. Are they coming to the website and then signing up for the product, right? And we can measure that in GA. But what this also allowed us to do was really move away from sort of the MQL and more so into an MQA goal. Because for us and for Honeycomb, right, we want to drive multiple practitioners from our named accounts to our website and drive that engagement, less so on the individual level. And so by removing that form, right, and allowing people to self-educate and really engage in the content that they want to read, right, they are staying around longer. And then we have demand base, right, behind the scenes that can help us sort of track those engagement minutes to help us understand what accounts are engaging with us, less so leads. And that allows our sales development team to better prioritize who they're reaching out to and what accounts they should be nurturing and building out from a pipeline generation perspective. So I would say, so long MQL, hello MQA. That's a bold statement. And there is value in removing forms for particular businesses who have very particular ideal customer profiles.
I would say congrats. I would like to see more marketing teams rethinking the gates, whether it's a form or some other way that is gating assets. That's bold. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about technology now. Let's talk about marketing automation and more specifically, what is the future of marketing automation? Kevin, we were talking last week, and you said rip and replace is maybe a thing of the past, so we should be thinking bigger or differently here. What are you thinking?
Well, what we're seeing, and I know our own experience has been that kind of back to the proliferation of touch points and apps and things that mediate the customer experience. It's more about architecting a smart stack that assumes there's going to be a lot of those and there's only going to be more, right? So how do I have kind of the foundation of data and understanding that I need to then enable these touch points and put them to work in an orchestrated way? And so I think, through that lens, orchestration, automation, being able to, something we talk about with our customers a lot is this idea of operationalizing your ICP. And how do you do that through applying this understanding of companies and customers to those systems? That's the kind of stuff we see people wanting to do. Whereas, 10 years ago, they might have focused on marketing automation, right? I need to be able to queue up emails and send emails and measure landing pages. So those things haven't gone away, but the role of orchestration and optimization has changed, and the number of systems involved are quite different. So all that is to say, we don't see people looking to move past their marketing automation platforms as much as augment them or build around them and make sure that they're using a common data foundation and common customer understanding to orchestrate across all those systems.
That's great. Raja, I know you also have some strong points of view here, especially via PLG lens. What is the future of marketing automation in the PLG world?
So one of the things I like when I talk to startup entrepreneurs and founders starting their company, the first thing I talk about is pay attention to the data stack, because one of the things a lot of mature companies struggle with is data is usually siloed between those three functions I talked about, right? You can think about product data usually is in Mixpanel, Amplitude, or something like an AWS. For marketing, it can be in Marketo, or it can be like a tool like Google Analytics, right? And then on the sales side, it's mostly in Salesforce. I mean, that's where the sales teams live. So as a result, to Kevin's point, at this multiple touch points, it's super hard to get insights from data if data is siloed between these three functions. So one of the things I see happening, may not be now, but in the near future, is this whole movement of having a centralized data organization. And data, basically, there's one centralized data lake where all the functions are basically dumping the data. And you access the data via API. Now, if you put a PQL lens or a product qualified lens, you can make the argument, why does marketing automation needs to sit outside the product? Why it is not inside the product? So there will be some I think, interesting evolution happening from a perspective of marketing. I see that happening in the next 5 to 10 years, as product and marketing gets closer and closer, right, from a journey perspective. We'll see some, there is some already interesting work happening in this space, like Notion and Figma. I know they're doing some experimentations around this.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
This, I will double down on that. This is something we're seeing as well with our customers, like this progression to, I think the name that's been flown around is the modern data stack. I don't know if it's the right name, but the centralized data warehouse, the ETLing in and out data, and then potentially a future where production apps will be sitting on top of that data warehouse versus siloed, right? So that's a different world that may be coming. So thanks for the insights here. We mentioned a couple of tools. Let me ask you a question like off script here. What is your secret tech stack? What is maybe 1 or 2 tools that give you a competitive advantage that is not obvious? And please don't say Salesforce or HubSpot or market. We all know those tools. But what's maybe one tool that you think that you're running the business on right now?
I'm not the right person to ask that question, and I'll tell you why. I don't know how much you all know about 1Password, but 1Password is super passionate about our user security and privacy. So it could be a little bit anal about stuff like, so for example, we hardly use any cloud products because we're worried about sending the customer data to the cloud. So the stuff we use is majority of the stuff we use are either in-house or on-prem products. We also believe in first-party tracking, which makes my job as a marketeer incredibly hard. But we do use tools like Marketo and Kevin, we use Clearbit as well. So yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you, Kevin, Sarah, Sheridan. What is one tool that maybe CMOs don't know about?
I'll be that guy and say Mad Kudu. And what's funny is as I thought about it, I know. I was like, okay, I'll say it. But it's for us having rather than the MQL or I love the MQA direction. We call ours MELs, marketing engaged leads. But having that not just be yes or no in terms of qualification, but instead of some scale, so I can give it a weighting. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how optimization systems want to work, right? It's very hard if it's a yes or a no, but now if I've got a score I can work with, now I can figure out, okay, where's the sweet spot and what knobs to turn. So for us, really fine-grained lead scoring helps us get a lot more insight into where the demand is being spent well.
I was not fishing for that, but thank you.
I know you weren't. I know you weren't.
Yeah, you're. I'm blushing here. Sarah, Sheridan, don't say Mad Kudu.
I'll say it's sort of on the follow-up thread to the last question. It's a modern BI tool. Right. So there's a variety out there. We at Honeycomb, we use Mode. And what this allows us to do as marketers is all understand what our impact metric is, right? So whether you're in field marketing or whether you're in demand generation, right? Whether you're in product marketing or maybe on the evangelist side, right? We all have a metric that we need to be moving to help the business succeed. And sometimes finding how to measure that metric is extremely challenging, right? It's coming from multiple sources. And so by having a solution like Mode, we are able to pull those metrics very quickly, right? In a chart or in a couple of charts. And, marketing at Honeycomb, we have data fidelity as sort of the foundation within our teams so that we can make informed decisions very quickly, right, to be able to hit those metrics. So I would say that is our go-to tech stack tool right now. Yeah.
And Sheridan, just when you say we have access to the data, we compute the metric, we mean the marketing team directly, right? So you don't go through a centralized organization.
Yes, we as the marketing team, but Mode has also become sort of our foundation for fidelity for other organizations within Honeycomb. So product teams and engineering teams and customer success, right? We're help sort of pioneering, right, what that foundation looks like, because our data team sits within our revenue ops org, right? But now we're able to provide that ability to become informed, right, on an org level.
Got it. Excellent. Sarah, something different.
So I've actually been fortunate to use a customer data platform, both at some of the large companies I've worked at, as well as the startups. And, whether you're using Segment or mParticle or, an up and comer like Rudder, I think having that ability to move your data and move those kind of customer segments and cohorts across different views and, use it to actually drive some of that product-based triggered nurturing, and also use it to inform some of your paid media marketing is really, really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helps bring together product and marketing again as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Alex, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump on what Sarah said, because going back to my Atlassian experience, we used Segment extensively and we moved away completely from Google Analytics. So Segment was basically, pushing data into Redshift. And then we had this Tableau infrastructure. So you can slice and dice the data, which was sitting in the data warehouse. So Segment was, I would say, one of those transformational tools for
tools that you use. Absolutely.
From our perspective.
Yeah. No, that's very well said. And Raj, that's in line with your, and let's talk a little bit about data strategy. Let's talk about data strategy and what it means to CMOs. And with that example, Raj, you're advocating again, like there is a central data warehouse, there is a Redshift or a Snowflake or something, and you're building a on top of that. In principle, it's great, like a centralized place, everyone can go, there's fidelity, that's great. But how do the different teams access that data? Like what skills do I need to have in the marketing organization to be able, do I need to know SQL? Do I want your team to know SQL? Do we want, I know you're thinking progressively on that and you have data engineers in your team.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that thinking a little bit?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the things, again, being part of a company which we're in the forming stage, we debated about this a lot, but we thought that the data organization needs to be centralized. And now it's part of the engineering organization because it's very engineering heavy, right? So there's one central data organization who is thinking about overall data architecture, thinking about nomenclature, and all the functions basically work closely with the data organization, the central data organization, in defining those nomenclature and architecture. But I have analysts in my team, and then I have data engineers. Data engineers in my team basically does a translation between the analyst and central data organization. So I actually, I'm sure every single person in this room have engineering organization as part of the marketing. Now, if you go back 15, 20 years back, you won't have seen it. So that tells you that there's this huge transformation happening right now in general from a marketing function perspective, or the CMO role is evolving a little bit.
Yeah. Sarah, is that similar for you, for your case? Is it again a centralized, data organization or a chief data officer or data ops? And how does marketing get a seat on that table?
Yeah, we actually introduced that idea of a data and operations leader at TaxJar, and it was instrumental. The data and operations leader actually became one of my new best friends, and it was a critical role to actually help bring together all the different stakeholders to help define that data dictionary, to actually help us come together on use cases and figure out what we really need to do and how to roll out new tools, whether it was, a Segment or an Amplitude, and make sure we're getting the most out of it. I actually think it's really good to have that role sitting outside of marketing and to actually have it as a bit of an independent function that's brokering, the needs across all of the other key stakeholders. And I do see at points, though, it would be helpful to have more data engineers still within the marketing team. So Raj, I'm going to take that one from you and go advocate for that. There are still hurdles, even with having that centralized model at times, of then being able to kind of implement some of the use cases on your own. So, but other than that, I think it's a really, really critical function to have as a centralized team and to, broker all of the information across teams.
Sheridan and Kevin, I mean, what is your setup, first of all, in terms of the data stack, and what conversations are happening in the company around data that potentially the marketing team is not involved in, right? And maybe they're too technical, maybe it's infrastructure, maybe it's something like, how do we get the CMO closer, or the marketing organization in general closer to that, centralized, data stack?
I can talk first. We had well, ours is in marketing, so we're pretty close. Honestly, to your point earlier about data engineering and taking some of the SQL out of the equation, dbt has been a game changer for us in terms of the ability to combine and refine data. But just because data ops lives within marketing for us doesn't mean there aren't conversations that we probably should be in around the data that we're not. And so from my perspective, some of those are sales, right? So pipeline quality, what does it really look like as you try to extend these conversations? Having sales and marketing come together has been very helpful in that. So I can argue about it, but I will argue with myself, which I do. But I'd say for us, a different sort of challenge is how do you get finance in those conversations, right? I mean, to put a finer point on it, I feel like they've got their metrics and business, business guides, and then we'll sit down to talk about something like, lead gen budget for the next quarter, and realize, oh, right, we don't quite have a common language around those things. And you're looking at this and I'm looking at this, and so I'd say maybe that's an area of opportunity for us, is how do we bring finance closer to those revenue metrics?
Got it. And I love this holistic thinking of every function. Sheridan, I assume you sitting in revenue marketing and advocating for RevOps, you're playing a central role at Honeycomb in terms of data and how data flows.
Yeah, absolutely. And I touched on this earlier in the panel. This one's an interesting one for Honeycomb. We are a very data-centric organization across all of our departments, right? And that being said, as I mentioned, marketing has sort of pioneered the foundation for a data strategy, right? In the implementation, as I said, of Mode, right? But that was a cross-functional decision to bring in a centralized BI tool so that we could develop some sources of truth, right? I think that's something that we haven't addressed in this conversation, is that with so many tools, right, you could try running a very simple report in HubSpot or Salesforce and you could come out with a different result, right? And that could steer teams in very different directions. And so I would say every org at Honeycomb is extremely data-driven, and we are using data to make informed decisions, whether we're in product or on a growth team or on a marketing team. But the biggest advantage of having it as a centralized unit is being able to really secure that data fidelity, right? And then having a growing team that's able to maintain that fidelity and also help us all sort of become a data engineer when we need to be, right? When you're using such a flexible tool, like many of the BI solutions that are out in the market right now, we all can sort of self-serve, but knowing that we have that underlying fidelity, as I mentioned, to make informed decisions. So I would say, yeah, marketing has helped pioneer it, but every organization is leveraging it to their own benefit, knowing that we have that source of truth. In terms of my role, metrics that I would like to get closer on, that I already am taking steps towards, are specific like growth metrics, like we've been talking about, product-led growth metrics, because I'm seeing sort of an intersection between product-led and sales-led, especially as we sort of layer in sales development teams to sort of help be the advocates for teams that are signing up for free products and really helping them and enabling them versus selling them. And so for me and my org, right, to get closer to that data, to understand what's working at different stages of the product-led funnel, it'll help our entire team not only help drive the right conversations, but it'll help us figure out at the top what campaigns are driving the most qualified conversations.
Got it. Absolutely. We are getting a question here that I think is very interesting, and I want to bring it up to the panel. You can answer it any way you see fit. We talked a lot about data and how data is changing in different skills and, BI systems and modeling systems and data warehouses. We talked about different technologies. For someone who steps into the CMO role for the very first time, a first-time CMO, what would you advise them to prioritize first? Would it be team-related, org-related, managing up? Would it be data stack? Would it be tech stack? Would it be a quick win? What would you advise a brand new CMO that steps into that role?
This is top of mind for me because I actually got to speak yesterday with a guy named John Ellett, who wrote a book called The CMO Manifesto. It's about 10 years old. And I read it when I started at Clearbit a year ago, and I got to say, "Hey, I read your book. I liked it." And he's the editor at Forbes, and we're talking, a contributor at Forbes. So anyway, the thing that I was telling him advice I keep trying to give myself is finding the right, we're change agents in CMO roles, right? We're supposed to come in and create that change, but finding the right cadence and pace of change and in the right areas in a way that moves quickly, but also brings the rest of the company and team with you is always a challenge. And so I told him I kind of come back to that as we try to move quickly, but not so quickly we leave others behind. And so I think metrics that allow you to tie your change directions to what's happening in the teams, and especially with the teams that are working directly with customers at every stage, are some of the most important to pay attention to right away, because they give you this pulse, this visceral feeling of where the company meets the market, and you need that as you start bringing in change and moving in new directions as your sort of guide and governor. So
I think a first-time CMO will be inclined to try to change too many things too quickly and not be able to get the rest of the organization going. Any other points of advice for first-time CMOs?
I think my follow-up advice to that is as a leader, a marketing leader, you'll come in and there's going to be pieces of the entire funnel that are broken, right? And we have the habit, right, marketers, of let's change it all. We can do it all. And so I would say my advice that I continue to remind myself is focus on the metric that matters most for the business right now. Right. And align your entire organization to that metric. Help them understand how can you in your specific role help move that metric? What are some of those reports that can help you understand in your role how you can move that metric, the what's working, the what's not working. I would say the other piece of that is keep your collaboration and your alignment with sales healthy, open, doors always open. Before you're working on quarterly plans, review them with sales, right? Sales is our customer. And so again, we have the need to want to do it all. But if we can focus on what are the things that are going to move that metric and get alignment from sales so that they know you're working to support their goals, great, I would say great sort of first two steps, stepping into a new role.
I love this direction towards focus, like focus on specific change agents, focus on specific metrics.
Sorry, Raj, I cut Raj off, I believe.
No, it's fine. So what I always, and I've been thinking about, I've been thinking about this a lot actually, and like when I look back, when I joined 1Password and even like Palo, the natural tendency for new leaders joining into the organization is to gravitate towards this, the strategy, the craft side, and not think as much on the people and the culture side. So I made a promise that I'm gonna, like my first 6 months at 1Password will be predominantly focused on the organization and the people. And I spend a lot of my energy on building the organization from the ground up. Because if you don't have the right people in the right roles, your success is very much dependent on your team's success. If your team is not successful, you're not successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And strategy is easy, culture is hard. I mean, it's incredibly hard to do. But once you establish the right culture, it's like magic. Things just happen. I mean, the right things start happening. So my advice to any, first-time CMO is, hey, don't forget about the people piece, because people part is important, if not more important than the strategy and the craft side.
Great. Sarah, any advice from you? And we have some questions coming up, so I'm glad we have a few minutes to.
Yeah, and Alex, I think this is related to another question that you had been thinking about as well, but I would also say, focus on the user and the customer. I think a lot of times we all say that we're user focused and customer focused, but when was the last time you actually spoke directly to one? Right. So when you're stepping in as a new CMO, spend those first 30 days, read support tickets, try to talk directly to a few customers, tag along on a few sales conversations, and then reach out to your network. You probably have folks in your network who are potential prospects for your company. Use that to kind of triangulate the information and really bring to life what's behind all of those metrics that matter, and really can help refocus your team, your peers, and your leadership as well as you make some of those.
I love that. That's so true. So true. And just a reminder, like we're talking about that as the last week, the average tenure of a CMO is less than 2 years. So what you focus first when you step in the role is going to be very, very important, right? Because you don't have a lot of time to iterate. Some questions, one from Hillary. What advice would you give to a brand new marketing team at a startup? I get that question a lot when I advise startups. It's a tough question. I'd like to open it up, whoever wants to answer that. What should a founder be looking, and what is the expectation of a brand new marketing team to startup?
Say I'm a fan of the sort of customer development principles. I think cutting the sales versus marketing versus business development too finely in a startup is probably it has some pitfalls. So getting together and really, really working with customers to understand why the product is valuable and how you're creating and capturing value from them, and how you write about your ICP assumptions. I think those are really important to do, and as a team.
Mm-hmm.
I would say think of small and scrappy ways to build brand. Number two, it's much easier to focus on paid marketing, but focus on unpaid marketing, SEO, and content as well. As a startup, these are easy ways to acquire customers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, and just building on that piece around brand and, being tight with the customer, just building consistency to what you're doing. I think a classic issue with the startups that, we're going to keep pivoting, we're going to keep changing. And what's really important for prospects and customers and for building a brand is consistency. So, create a plan and stick to a few things that you're going to do, whether that's a webinar once a quarter or it's a customer newsletter, even some of those small tactics that just help kind of keep the drumbeat going and keep your team focused too are super important.
And I would add, be the best you can be in those things that you focus. You have to be on the top front there. That's a great point. A question
Alex, I'm going to say two quick things because the two things that are near and dear and with my experience in startups. The first one be set yourself up for success with a scalable MarTech stack, right? And we've talked a lot about that, right? It's a lot easier to start with the right tools and to go back and try to fit them in later, right? That's very disruptive. So really prioritize revenue ops, which I think is another question on this list. Because again, revenue ops allows you to see sort of the full picture, not just the marketing or the sales picture, but the revenue picture. I would say the second one, to Raj's point around being scrappy, is I see a lot of startups try to do things on their own, right? Create their own podcast or create their own webinar series, right? There's a lot of people having great conversations. that you can fit your brand into. And so make yourself available, right? And work with your senior leadership team to all wear that evangelist hat, right? And see where you can fit yourself in versus trying to create something that is net new, because creating net new takes a ton of calories, right? And it takes a ton of effort, and sometimes that delivery won't be, match your expectations. So open yourself up and make yourself available.
Yeah. As you can tell, there's a lot of startup DNA in this panel. So we all love those questions. We have 4 minutes and maybe a couple of minutes for each one of the last questions. What are the first steps you take to move from a marketing generated pipeline attribution structure to a full pipe, full revenue model? Is attribution dead? Any thoughts on this one?
I mean, the first step is you need to start looking at the data, right? I mean, you need to pull in the data, and you need to pull in the data with the right team. So it's not just marketing, it's sales, and it's finance, right? And perhaps for some organizations, sort of like what sometimes business operations and rev ops sort of sit in the same home, because I've seen a lot of pipeline and revenue models built very different, right? And everybody sort of has their own idea of what they should look like. And so the first step is you need alignment. You need alignment on how you're going to build it, what data points you're going to build, and then get alignment on the definitions, right? How I look at an MQA may be different how Kevin looks at an MQA, right? And so you need that clarity across the go-to-market and finance leadership team so that you're building a model that, one, is pulling in the right data. 2, everybody is aligned on the definitions for each of those pieces of the funnel.
Mm-hmm. And Sheridan, I would add to that, the CMO, the marketing teams needs to be more comfortable talking about pipeline, talking about dollar signs than, hashtag number of MQLs, hashtag number of leads, right? So the more we try to think this way, I think it'll come. Great point. Last question from Chris. What are the signals that an organization should move from siloed ops teams, marketing, sales, CS, into a revenue ops team? Sheridan, I'm sure you have something to say there.
I've talked a lot. I'm just, I'm happy to share my perspective, but I'm sure the other members have some great ideas here.
Yeah, for us, I think once we had shared sort of data ops service, as we talked about, and we had metrics that we could use across the organization, we found that there's this central need together to understand what is happening, form a hypothesis, try something, and then see what happened, see if it moved the needle, and move the needle like a lot, not just noise, but did you make a 10-20% impact? And that central revenue optimization function needs to live somewhere, right? If everybody's kind of trying different stuff. So for us, that was the realization. We all need to work together in a place where we can do that. And, it's ongoing.
Sarah, your thoughts?
I haven't been in an organization where we've quite made it a unified team yet, but I would say that we have made sure that we're working as a really well-oiled machine, cross-functional, ops team across, all of those different functions. And that means, having that shared data dictionary, having the shared and understood sources of truth of data, looking at it in the same way, and meeting regularly, so whether it's like what number Wednesday, or you're looking at, your pipeline metrics, end to end together. I think you can build the team informally as well as formally.
Excellent. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Sheridan, Kevin, Sarah, Raj. That was a great conversation. We touched on so many topics. For the audience, this is recorded. We'll share the recording along with some insights and that we will pull out. Raj, thanks for sharing the article on marketing-led growth. Thank you all again for attending. Thanks to our panel. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.